Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the third session of day one of week 2 of ALYFE Connects, our very first virtual event brought to you exclusively by ALYFE Group. We have our first health and fitness session of the week planned, and what a session it promises to be. We are welcoming Benny Price, personal trainer and CEO of Joompa, the online-based personal training app which brings trainers to the convenience of your home. I'm very excited to welcome Benny because for those of you who don't follow this man on Instagram, I suggest you should. He is practically an exercise encyclopedia and fitness fountain of knowledge. And this evening, he will be sharing with us some insights on dispelling the myths and misunderstandings that surround a lot of areas when it comes to training and nutrition. And he will also be sharing with us a complete guide and insights into training during Ramadan. So, without further ado, please help me welcome the very well-informed and the very well-spoken Mr. Benny Price. Good evening, Benny.
Evening, Jacob. Thank you very much for that introduction. I have to say there's never quite such alliteration in my own when I do them for myself, but
practically like yourself, Benny. You're a busy guy. I know you take great personal pride, as you should, in your very well-researched and well-read approach to fitness. So thank you for joining us to talk us through some of that.
My pleasure.
Where I believe you're in Langkawi at the minute, right? You managed to escape out there for the lockdown.
Yeah, it's not feeling so wise at this very minute as there is a torrential storm incoming and it's making its way into the place where I'm sat, but it's the only place with any decent internet here, so I'm hoping that's the priority at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, we can hear you just fine, mate, so you're doing well so far. So, firstly, before we dive into it, just tell me, Langkawi aside, how have things been for you so far this lockdown period? How have you found the few weeks at home from a training perspective, or even a personal perspective?
It's been quite refreshing, really. There's a lot of things you want to do as both a business owner and a personal trainer. You don't necessarily get the time to. I mean, the reason why it usually works so well to go on personal training courses is that someone says, you can't coach anyone for the next 4 days, you're going on a course, you're dedicated to this. And they're really beneficial, but it's very difficult to take the time out to do that. And that's almost been forced upon me. So I've had quite a lot of time to spend studying and sort of upskilling and leveling up myself. I mean, it's tough. It's tough for everyone in the industry at the moment. I mean, you're looking at not being able to earn a living, and myself and the business that I run is based on freelancers, right? All of our coaches, they're not people with salaries. No one's getting any compensation from the government or anything at the moment. It is, you're just basically someone who is used to earning on an hourly wage and no longer can do so. So it's pretty tough for us. And it's also pretty difficult from a pivoting point of view as a business, because the foundation of what we do is taking pride in the quality of the personal training experience that we deliver and the quality of session that we deliver. And we're not an online personal training platform. We're very much used to being able to send PTs into someone's home and deliver the anywhere from 80 to 180 ringgit worth of value in person. And to suddenly then go, oh no, we're an online training platform, it wasn't something that I felt comfortable doing overnight, because it's like, okay, well, how are you going to make sure that you're still getting across everything you need to and still delivering the same value to a client, and where does that price point sit? So I think we've gotten it about there now, and I'm pretty pleased with the product that we're literally as of kind of today really going to start promoting in terms of the online service we offer. But I won't lie, it's not been an easy transitional period, and in a way it's pretty good because it forces us to think a little bit more about what we do and the service that we provide. But yeah, it's been tough.
Yeah, mate, I bet. Well, I think a lot of us have had to adjust, sadly, quite a fair amount. But it's good to hear that you have been able to pivot in some way. So, what will this online service look like? Are you going down are you maintaining the whole one-on-one thing? Because I know you guys pride yourself on the very personal touch that you give your clients, or are you kind of now finding a way to attract and address like a more mass market, like group online classes, for example? What is it going to look like?
No, we're pretty insistent upon the value in our product and the skills that our coaches have being it's a one-to-one experience, and it's all about the personalization, the individualization, the fact that resistance training to us is not just a blanket prescribed, everyone does the same thing for the same number of reps, regardless of their tolerance, their body, what their joints can deal with, what they were able to do last week compared with this week. Like there's a big aspect of that involved in this, and we don't really feel like that can change, and neither do we really feel like we can start producing online programming, which, if you look at a lot of online programming, one of the big problems with it is, I mean, I guess we can kind of go a little bit into the myth busting side of things here, or look at how the fitness
this is what we're here for. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, myth one, online training.
Yeah, I mean, online coaching, it's always been slightly poisoned, like pretty much everything in the fitness industry, by money, and as opposed to online coaching has very rarely been a means of helping as many people as possible. If you go onto like any website that's like teaching coaches how to be online coaches, you'll like every single thing you'll see on there is like, be your own boss, earn more money, like be able to coach more clients at a time, and at no point does it go deliver a better experience for your client. Like that's never on that list. And so
it's a multiple marketing scheme, almost, somewhat.
Exactly, it's more about volume than quality, and the way we are as a business, and as our ethos is the other way around. So what the main conundrum has really been, how can we replicate the experience of having someone one-to-one with you? What camera angles do you need? What SOPs are we going to put in place as a business? Because we were actually a little bit more relaxed about it before this, because we knew our coaches were there with a client, and you can have a little bit more flexibility in the movements that you're able to use for assessments, for example. But when you're trying to coach a client without being able to put their elbow in the right place when they're doing a movement, or make sure their shoulder, like be able to touch their shoulder capsule and feel if it's turned into rotation that's putting strain on it, all that kind of stuff, you need very specific abilities. They need to know the difference between anterior tilt and posterior tilt verbally. You need to be able to say that, and they can do that on a screen. You're going, oh no, go slightly more into posterior tilt, and they need to have the control of their lumbar spine to tuck their hips that little bit more, so that they're now in the right position, because you can't help them. So it's that kind of stuff that we were getting quite particular about making sure is a standard operating procedure within our coaching sort of ethos and protocols.
Yeah, I mean, I know you guys generally pride yourselves very much. I mean, you guys are far from doing kind of trendy workouts of the day where you bounce around doing a few star jumps. So you guys are really, really in-depth and very well educated and experienced when it comes to, as you said, pointing out tiny biomechanical adjustments, which can make a huge difference over time in someone's efficacy of training, right? So I guess you've got to make sure that you stick to that level of quality, which must be tough, but an interesting challenge for you. But so more generally, what I want to ask you actually, as far as the lockdown is concerned, because I know that you wrote a fantastic piece, which I'll plug in a second below. You wrote a fantastic piece just before lockdown about training and about not only maintaining and sustaining, but also making gains and maximizing training efficiency during lockdown, because I think it's all too common perhaps for someone to say, oh, I can't go to the gym, I can't use my fancy equipment, therefore I must sit and rot at home. So one of the myths that we can maybe start with addressing here is how being at home and basically being in lockdown means that I will get fat. That myth one. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, like, for a start, the fact that you can't move is going to have, I mean, you can look at kind of three aspects of your existence as a human, right? You've got, in terms of burning calories in your day, you've got three parts. You've got your BMR, which is the amount of energy and calories that you'd burn if you did absolutely nothing. So basically, if you woke up, lay in bed, and then shut your eyes again in the evening and went back to being asleep, right? That's what your body needs in order just to keep ticking along, maintain like its temperature, keep your eyes blinking, all that kind of stuff, keep breathing. Then you've got something called your NEAT, which is basically the energy that you're putting out that is not exercise related. So it's non-exercise energy, right? So that is walking around, going to the cupboards, opening that, moving around in your house, right? You have that anyway. That's going to have ended up dropping quite significantly for a lot of people because they haven't got a commute anymore. In Malaysia, that doesn't make a massive difference to a lot of people because they're getting in a car and driving to their office and then getting in a lift and going upstairs to the office. So, I mean, it just depends how diligent someone was something like that. Like if they were walking to lunch at work, if they were getting public transport, a lot of that stuff, then it's going to have a big effect because like that step count on your wearable is going to plummet.
Sure.
But if you look at the number of calories both of those two things put together make up in the day for someone, it's anywhere between like 1,000 and 2,000. It could be even more than that. It massively depends on how big you are and how much energy your body requires to keep ticking. It's, you know, it's a pretty logical energy equation, right? If a bigger car requires more petrol to run it. So that's kind of how it works for us as humans. And then that little cream on the top is your gym training. So that's your 400 calories, 500 calories. A lot of people get a little bit distracted by active calories on their watches or whatever, which by the way are always just guessing how many calories you're burning.
Don't tell me that. No, I swear by man. I'm obsessed with my numbers. I know it's telling me the truth.
Yeah. So
okay.
That's a pretty one. Yeah. So but I mean, if someone was going, okay, throughout lockdown, I usually go for my workout, that whatever I choose to do for exercise. And honestly, unless we're looking very specifically at muscle building, we can talk about that in a sec. But if we're just talking about maintaining fat stores, because fat is literally just your body's like cupboard where it stores energy for later.
Yeah.
It's like it's our body's version of a battery, right? Where if you pumped energy into a system, like you were in like year 7 electronics or something, and you were putting in more than the light needed to turn on, then the battery would store the energy. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Really so
that's all that your fat stores are. And if we're looking at making sure that no more fat is stored, then we just need to balance your energy in and your energy out. So if now, I don't know, 3 times a week, you're not going to whatever exercise you were used to doing, if that exercise was burning 400 calories, then 3 times a week, just cut 400 calories out your diet. And you should end up with pretty much the same thing. You're probably going to have to, I don't know, walk some corridors around the floor of your condo or something in order to get your steps to where they usually are. Anyone who wears a wearable will be able to quite quickly work out, oh yeah, I'm where I usually am with this. There's nothing to panic about.
So what you're saying is it really doesn't make as big, it doesn't have to make nearly as big a difference as some people are making it out to be. Like the common trend or whatever, or trope on social media is very much like, oh, I'm going to come out of this, I'm going to undo all my progress, whatever progress I was making previously in the gym or whatever. Now I'm just going to be stuck at home rotting on the sofa. But really what you're saying is in terms of calorific input output, just make over the same course of time as you would be doing exercise, just adjust your diet and you can maintain.
The big problem you have though is that when people, like a lot of what keeps people from being able to eat on a standard day is the fact that they're busy, right? They're not sitting down for a big indulgent breakfast because they're grabbing a coffee and like an energy bar on the way out their door. They're not eating until lunch. Then they're going downstairs, they're having whatever they have by their office, and then they're coming home and that's when they'll maybe eat most of their calories at dinner. But even getting home for dinner is delayed because they've gone to the gym afterwards or something like that. So it's just your scope for eating and your scope for snacking in particular is much lower. So the reason a lot of people will end up with a bit of an issue in terms of that calorie balance over lockdown is it's just eating out of boredom as opposed to eating out of being hungry, which is the tricky thing.
Sure. So in fact, you might go as far as to say it's not the lack of exercise necessarily that might make you fat during lockdown. It's more just the boredom. So it's more the situation you find yourself in. But I guess which brings us on to the second point.
Yeah.
And that is that, and when it comes to muscle building in particular, like you don't have to sacrifice muscle building to maintain on lockdown.
No, I mean I really don't think you do at all. It's muscle building is just adaptation, right? Our muscles the point of our muscles, the point of our physical ability is to provide us with a means of defending ourselves, acquiring food. You know, the only reason you need to be any stronger is if you're faced with a stimulus, like a threat or the requirement to get food, or someone else in your tribe trying to kick your head in. Like there's limited reasons why they happen, but it's the response to a stimulus. And what the gym has provided us with is a means of, one, compensating for how little we do in the rest of our day, which is pretty handy for a lot of people being able to work a desk job and then keep in shape, because they just intensify and compact all of their daily movement and exercise into a very short period of time. But two, it's allowed us to hack our body systems. So something like having to climb to a certain height or to get away from something or something like that, right? We don't have to climb higher and higher to get away from a threat. We could just do more and more lat pull downs on a very repeated, optimal basis and stimulate that same responsive adaptation. So it provides people with the ability to optimize how they're getting that stimulus to their muscles. And that doesn't have to change during lockdown. Now, it's all just about how you choose to provide that stimulus. The only thing that changes during lockdown is that you need to be better at creating it. It really helps separate the wheat from the chaff, because you've got an issue here where, say you're in the gym, right? If you want to provide more and more stimulus to your chest by doing chest presses, well, you can use the same rubbish technique set after set after set, but start just throwing more and more weight on the bar or on the dumbbells, using bigger dumbbells, and you'll create more stress to your chest muscles. Now, the likelihood is you're doing it whilst creating more stress to your glenohumeral joint, like your shoulder, or any of the other various parts of that equation when you're doing a chest press, but you're able to create more and more stimulus. Now, if you've just got push-ups at your disposal and you weigh the same amount, apart from doing more and more and more reps, which eventually just becomes tiring to the point where your head feels like it's going to explode, or like your lats can't keep your elbow in the right position or something like that, you're really going to struggle. And your ability to load particular muscles as heavily as possible, even with like a small dumbbell, and create that isolation, is very much highlighted when you're in the position of training from home. If what you're trying to do is fatigue your muscle and stimulate your muscle to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not strong enough, I need to be stronger, and I'm going to repair and come back stronger. If that's the goal, then you do need to be able to create that stress, and it's not necessarily a piece of cake.
No, of course not. But I think, but having read your piece recently, I think what you came up with, like a very detailed and a very thorough training plan, indicating that if you had the means of doing so, that stress and that stimulation of the muscle could be done through like a rigorous, disciplined approach, rather than just saying, oh, I'm at home, I have no choice but to fall over and remain on the floor and do nothing all lockdown. Not at all. Like you have absolutely every opportunity to not just maintain, but even build muscle growth through. And it'll be harder because if you're used to going to the gym and lifting bigger weights, and now all of a sudden all you have is maybe press-ups or elevated press-ups at best, it'll take you a lot longer and a lot more reps. But if you apply the same principles as you do in the gym, assuming they're diligent principles, if you apply the same ones as you do to your dumbbell press, as you do to your press, as you do to your body weight press-ups, you can still like use lockdown very efficiently as a training period.
Well, I mean, that's the flip side to the very argument I just made, in that you've also only got a few exercises at your disposal, right? So someone training at home they haven't got loads of machines and cables and dumbbells and bands and all these other options necessary to them. So they're forced to get very good at particular things. You could have been rubbish at a chest press and a fly and a bench and all these machines and just used enough of them to kind of get yourself through a workout. But if you're rubbish at push-ups, it's gonna really be a very unproductive, and you've got nothing else to practice over the next 6 weeks or however long the period that someone's training in lockdown for. So they should get very good at them. They should get much better at creating that force and making their muscles and their muscles around whatever joint they're trying to work create that force. And so, yeah, it is very productive. I mean, and I think the other thing as well is it's when you're at home using the same exercises every day, it becomes very obvious and puts a spotlight on whether or not you're getting any better at them. It's quite easy for a lot of people to pop into the gym, use 5 different machines and leave the gym. And actually they haven't done a workout that's created more stimulus and forced more adaptation in like a year, because they've just gone in and used some random stuff and gone, oh, that was a hard set. Yeah, that must be good. But the only way you're going to see growth after the initial, like what they call like newbie gains, or the basic stuff that someone's going to get when they first start out in the gym and anything is better than nothing, is if they're making consistent progress. And that article that I wrote was just about how it's just a means of giving someone structure, which is all, honestly, as PTs, once we've worked out the complex stuff, like, okay, what is someone's joints capable of? What are they capable of? What are their joints capable of? What is their minimum volume tolerance? And actually, in the article, I kind of help people work that out for themselves as well, because everyone's got, you know, their minimum recoverable volume, minimum effective volume. So the least that they could do to actually see a change, basically, and then the maximum recoverable volume. So the most they could do, or they can't recover well enough from it to perform again next time. You know, it's not always more is more, right? It can get to the point where it's detrimental.
Yeah, it's like, what do they call that? The marginal, there's a curve in economics, they call it, like the diminishing marginal returns or something. But yeah, I see your point.
Okay. Yeah, so you get to a point of diminishing returns. And it's, yeah, so you've got your joint positions, and your joint positions are probably they're gonna have the biggest impact on what muscles are being used, what muscles are being contracted, stimulated. And then once you've kind of figured that out, it's massively just a matter of having a plan of very gradual progression, taking someone through that plan, ensuring that they're at no point ever getting to a stage where they're having to compensate in order to keep making progress, or progress is at the detriment of their joints as opposed to purely causing muscle stimulation. And then, you know, there's always going to be a point where you plateau and your body can't keep making progress, because otherwise you'd be able to do 700 push-ups in a couple of weeks' time if every time you could just do more and more and more. Right? Yeah,
that logic.
So you need to then take it down and work either in a different rep range, or you just need to find, you've got loads of different modalities for creating that stress, right? Stress is not just more weight. It could be related to the amount of time you're keeping the muscle under tension. It could be, you know, that the force that you're creating could be related to how fast you're accelerating or how much mass you're moving, and what angle or degree you're taking that joint through is going to make a difference. So there's tons of different things you can use. They're all kind of pretty basic aspects of building muscle. And it's just about being very structured in usually just keeping all of them but one the same and improving one. And when one can't be improved anymore, then keep that consistent and see if you can start improving on any other aspects.
So I think that's very, very interesting, actually. I mean, when you put it that way, I mean, I'd love to be able to do 700 press-ups in 2 weeks, but it's never going to happen. But based on everything you've just said then, like in actual fact, and we'll get around to busting myth 1 by now, I think. But like in actual fact, this lockdown period and being stuck, being indoors with minimal equipment is actually a perfect opportunity for us to get back to basics, understand our own bodies and our own levels of stress-bearing ability from a very basic standpoint, and figuring out how best to improve that with a view to going back to better exercise later on once all this is over. So what I'm saying is, like, you can absolutely build muscle on lockdown. Like this time is no excuse for us to sit and rot just because we can't go and use the TRX cables in the gym or something. If anything, it's a fantastic opportunity for us to figure a few things out.
If someone had a fairly random training routine before that, I mean, it's
Yes. Yeah. The five machines in the gym, whatever you said. Yeah.
Yeah, well, but even if they were going to group classes or stuff, like it also just depends on how much you care about building muscle. Like a lot of people, it's not a big priority to them, and they prefer to use exercise as a form of entertainment, and like that's fine. I mean,
Mm.
it's very much a matter of people's goals. I think everyone gets a little bit kind of black and white with it. In terms of, you know, the issue I have with it is when people use movements that are very particularly kind of designed to stimulate muscle contractions and achieve that, and use it as a means of like entertainment. Um, Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of static.
It's okay. There you
Hello?
go. Of
Yeah,
course
okay.
now.
So
Yeah. There we go.
okay, so yeah, that's kind of where I find an issue with it. But if someone's usually kind of gone to group classes, right, and they've done loads of group classes, and part of the group classes has always been, push-ups and squats and all this kind of stuff, the chances are no one's ever actually taught you how to do a squat, like, well, like with a lot of detail, with
Yeah.
a lot of attention to form, with thinking about multiple small aspects about what you're doing, whether you're able to, keep your knees stable with a body weight squat, what's happening to your lower back in the base of your squat, how deep you're actually capable of going, because not everyone can squat to any depth. There are all sorts of limitations in your ankles, in your hips, in your back that are going to affect that. So it's a pretty good opportunity for someone to go, okay, well, there are some good tutorials online. In fact, you can find quite a lot of them on our Instagram page. Of like we've done like 12. I think we did 12 different. So on the Joompa Instagram there, we've got 12 different exercises that are good for people to do during lockdown without any equipment really required, and just getting really good at those 12 things alone. They're vital tools to, in the same way that like getting good at cooking whilst lockdown's on is going to be beneficial to your health when you go back to eating on a day-to-day and having to eat in a rush. Taking the time now to practice doing a good squat is going to be beneficial in the long run when you go back to rushing into a group class and going, oh, right, I've got to do 10 squats. I'm not just going to do them like at random. I've spent the past 6 weeks getting hella good at them. I'm going to actually nail these and get more bang for my buck by being able to focus on the muscles that whoever's shouting at me on stage wants me to use.
Fair enough then. So the opportunity is there, people. Basically, the opportunity is there. Don't see this lockdown as a limitation. Instead, see it as an opportunity to check out the 12 days of lockdown. I think you called them, isn't it? The ones on the series on.
When we thought there was only 12 days left.
Oh, wishful thinking, Benny. Really wishful thinking. But nevertheless, I think for all those watching at home, do check them out, because I had a look at them when they first came out, and like Benny says, they are a fantastic exercise. Well, literally exercise, but they are a fantastic guide and walkthrough to the fundamentals and the foundations of good exercise, which will actually be an excellent foundation for any good exercise coming out of all this.
Yeah.
So okay, let's consider myth one busted, and let's agree that gains, myth, what is it? Myth one. I will lose all my gains on lockdown. Not going to happen as long as you are diligent and disciplined about it.
Well, sorry, just caveat there, depending on what you call gains as well. If someone is jacked to the rafters, or they put on quite a lot of muscle whilst not on lockdown, they're going to need to maintain their calories. If they suddenly cut all their calories because they think, oh, I can't go to the gym and I can't, if they keep up their volume, if they think about the number of sets per week they're doing within a fatigue threshold, then that they just need to do a little bit of thinking. Oh, how many sets of chest work was I doing before lockdown started? Oh, if I counted this plus this plus this, it was probably, I don't know, 12 per week. Okay, well, I'm going to have to do 3 sessions of 4 sets of push-ups that are close to my fatigue levels. And I'm going to have to try and keep getting better at them. And as long as I keep my calories where they were, I'm not going to lose any mass. That's kind of how that needs to work. So there is a balance according to the food as well.
There is. I know very little about the equation itself, but I do understand that it takes muscle mass a lot longer to disappear than people than people think it does. But it's almost like an ego. It's almost like a kind of a weird placebo effect. You know, once you start going to the gym regularly, and then maybe you don't go for even like 4 or 5 days, you feel yourself melting away. It feels like so.
Yeah, but at the same time, so that volume thing I was talking about earlier, where you have the minimum effective dosage and then you've got your maximum recoverable dosage. If all you do is hit your minimum, that's enough for maintenance. It might not be enough for growth. You might not keep being able to make growth, but it's very easy to keep to maintain what you had as long as you're able to hit whatever your minimum effective is. It's very difficult to work out an exact number for everyone, but yeah, you'll probably it's if you're doing some resistance work with push-ups and a bazillion squats, you're probably all right.
Well, I mean, and anybody who goes to check out either Benny's or Joompa's Instagram, especially yours, because you've been putting out some excellent stuff during the lockdown period. Benny's Instagram will tell you that even body weight can be brutal, especially brutal. For a lot of people who have been, again, going back to the any number of machines in the gym, like moving along one plane of movement, getting very used to that plane of movement, shake things up a little bit, and you'll be amazed at what aches the morning after. You know, you'll be sore in places you didn't know you had. So, yeah, don't lose out on lockdown. You know, use this as an opportunity to rethink some things. Now, the second myth I would like to bust, because I know this is because again, anybody who follows you, and again, if they don't, they should. But anybody who follows you knows that you are, of course, a huge advocate for vegetarian or vegan. I forget which one it is. I forget to which extent you go down that rabbit hole. But vegan, yeah. Anybody knows that you're a huge advocate for a plant-based diet, both ethically and physiologically, I suppose. And so I'm sure you've answered this question to death. But I think for those who haven't had the pleasure of hearing you talk about it. And I imagine, and this is a question which is put to vegetarians the world over, especially in your line of work, and that is simply, how do you get enough protein on a vegetarian or vegan diet? Or simply the myth being that a vegan diet is protein deficient, or that otherwise you struggle to get enough protein when you're not slurping down chicken breast every single day. So talk to us a bit about the nutrition side of things there.
It's not necessarily a myth. I mean, as with most myths, there's always a foundation for people saying something, right? And there is less protein. There are fewer grams of protein per grams of food in pretty much anything vegan or vegetarian. I'm personally vegetarian. Than there is in eating. There are fewer grams of it. It's just the way it is. And not only that, but it's got lower bioavailability. But basically, it's harder for your body to access those nutrients. So you are at a disadvantage. I've never proclaimed personally that being a vegan or vegetarian is healthier or better for performance. I mean, if we're looking at myths, the Game Changers, whilst they had great intentions in making that movie, and I love what it's done to so many people, just making people think about things. There's a fair few myths that just aren't in line with what the science says, or the majority of science says. I mean, again, you've got to look at nutrition with a pinch of salt, because it's, scientifically speaking, it's pretty young compared with a lot of other science, and we are very complex individuals that no one really understands necessarily as well as they like to say they do. But yes, it's more difficult to get protein as a vegan or vegetarian. Now, if the sole priority of my existence was to get protein in my diet, then I probably wouldn't do it. But that's not really what I necessarily care about most in my day. In fact, I find eating a ton of protein in my day slows me down. It has a pretty heavy tax on you mentally, because of the amount of energy it requires from your system to digest. Also, why it's very good for weight loss is having a high protein diet, because it requires so much energy just digesting the damn stuff. So it's just a matter of priorities and principles, really. And from my point of view, it's also, people get very carried away with the amount of protein they think they need. Now,
perhaps that is more the myth. Perhaps that is more the myth than the myth to address. But I'll let you finish first.
Well, yeah, okay. So that it's again, that's not necessarily a myth. That is just people missing a little bit of perspective, I feel. If you look at a lot of the studies and how much protein is optimal for performance, and you look at how much protein the RDA is, like the RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And if you look at studies, they'll say anywhere from 1.6 to 2.2, so double to triple that. But that's because they're looking at what is going to, after what point you see a 0% increase in performance in elite athletes.
Again, marginal gain, if any gain.
Yeah, so, or not necessarily just elite athletes, but in people who are trying to elicit the maximum possible muscle gain on their day. And for me, it's not that I don't care about being strong and building muscle. It's something that I'm passionate about and that I help a lot of people do. It's just after a certain point in that process, I don't see it being worth it to massively increase my carbon footprint and my torture footprint in a means of getting that protein. It's just not in line with my personal ethics, and that's not to say that I think anyone else should have those ethics. That's just my personal opinion. And what I try to do with my own social media is just help those that have the same ethics but have health concerns see that it's not actually something they should be concerned about, because with modern science and modern knowledge and modern supplements, you don't necessarily need to be at any downfall in terms of your health and fitness if you are vegan or vegetarian. You can't just willy-nilly it. You've got to pay a little bit of attention to what you're eating and making sure that your diet does compensate for the fact that let's not shy away from the fact you've removed an entire food group from your diet. You've removed an entire food group that was fundamental to us evolving as a species. So that needs to be kept in perspective. But at the same time, I think some people get a little bit carried away with putting on muscle being the be all and end all of them making gains and being a factor in their life. And actually, if they cut their protein down by 30 grams, but got better sleep, had slightly less stressful lives, actually structured their gym training properly, there's a ton of things missing in most people's training or lifestyle outside of their protein consumption that would make them much better gains.
Okay, that's actually a very nice way of putting it. So the meathead, both physically and psychologically, in terms of the pure carnivore, I suppose, the literal meathead, who is insisting that he needs 8 chicken breasts a day, but maybe he's only sleeping 3 hours a night because his pre-workout is keeping his heart beating through his chest into the small hours of the morning. He could maybe look at swapping at least half of that chicken intake for a few more chickpeas and lentils and getting a bit more snooze. So I think actually that's a very good point to mention, is that protein intake is not the be all and end all of muscle growth. There are plenty more lifestyle factors associated with that as well. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it does make a fairly big, if you're trying to do drastic body composition changes to someone, you do need quite high protein intake. But again, you also need to consider the adherence of that. If you're a coach, a lot of coaches will prescribe very high protein and meat goals to their clients because it will get them results if you look at what studies have shown. But at the same time, I don't know that your client wants to eat 5 chicken breasts a day. And if your client can't stick to that and only manages to do that for a month, is your client going to lose more weight eating 5 chicken breasts a day for a month, or eating 1 or 2 for 3 months and looking at the progress in that situation? So yeah, I could go on about the way that sort of coaches blanket prescribe protein for a while, but I think it's much more about getting someone's health and lifestyle in order. Protein to me is, as long as someone's eating well, they will have the minimum protein requirement. It's then a matter of fine tuning and tweaking if it's really important that they do make some fairly drastic physical changes.
Sure. Understood. Okay, so there's a lot more to the protein intake equation or the conversation around that kind of thing than simply just it's only meat or bust. Like, and clearly, like, you'd be hard pressed to look at a bloke like yourself. I mean, God, you exercise, I think, more than anybody I know, and you fuel up purely by plants, and so most people would be hard pressed to argue that your diet is protein deficient. So it's good to know that there's a lot more to it than that. On the question of weight loss, actually, we have a question from the audience. If you feel like taking a swing at this, Josephine K, wondering if you'll be able to talk a little bit about the relationship between intermittent fasting and burning stored fats.
Good question, Josephine. I'm a pretty big advocate of intermittent fasting. I do like it, but it doesn't really change your fat stores. It's a myth. I mean, if we look at why most myths arise in the industry, it's because people like taking a fact and then running with it as a means of selling something. And everyone that's talked nonsense about intermittent fasting is almost certainly trying to sell a book or gain Instagram traction or come up with a means of proclaiming benefits that it has. And it's the same fundamental flaw that you have with intermittent fasting. You can copy and paste across a ton of things. You can copy and paste it across keto. You can copy and paste it across different exercise modalities. But with almost all diet and nutrition stuff, the bit where you'll see a lot of people on Instagram getting wound up, and you'll get them calling people bigots and stuff, is because someone's taken something that was actually founded with health in mind and taken it and gone, well, yeah, but no one cares about health. All anyone wants is weight loss. Right, let's tell people it's going to help them lose weight. And then all they need is some people to lose weight doing it, and hey, presto, it's a weight loss tool. And so if we're looking at burning stored fats, yes, during intermittent fasting, if you have depleted the stored carbohydrates that you had from the food that you've eaten, right, you are then going to have to resort to fat stores. You're going to have to go in the cupboard for energy, right? Because if you run out of the stuff that's on the kitchen counter, your body keeps stuff on the kitchen counter, which is your carb stores, basically. If you've got too much, if you've been shopping, right, if you've gone and eaten and you've brought in a load of produce and there's too much to fit on the kitchen counter as your carbs, you're going to put them in the cupboard as fats for later. And once you've used up all your carb stores, you're going to go into the cupboard for some fats. Now, if as a result of not having eaten anything for the past 16, 18, 20, 24, 48 hours, whatever you want to call it, that kitchen counter is empty of carb stores, you're going to go into the cupboard for fats, right? Now, you'll go in there and you'll use fats for now. But as soon as you take on any more shopping or food, you've got carbs again, and you're going to start using all your carb stores again. And the only way you will see any difference, like if you then went shopping and bought too much to put on your kitchen counter again, you'd have to fill your cupboards back up and you'd go back to burning carbs. So intermittent fasting does force you to burn fats for energy. And that is a good thing from a health point of view. You want to force your body to not just be this sugar monster that's constantly being given carbs on the table ready for it to burn because you're constantly eating. It's not good in training your energy pathways, let's call them, in training your body's ability to resort to burning fats for energy, right? Because, it's the same reason why people get hangry or they get grumpy, is because their bodies are just rubbish at using anything other than what's been spoon-fed to them and given to them, and then they're not very good at going in the cupboard. So it's good for that. It's good for if you're someone who cares about your performance. If you're someone that's going to then run, a half marathon or something, you need to be able to tap into those less accessible food stores. If you're someone that wants to get in very good shape and have a very low body fat percentage, well, that means you're going to have low fat stores, and that means that you need to have a strong energy management system in your body. Like there's just various elements. If you want to lose weight, your body needs to be capable of burning fat, right? So if it never has to do so because you're constantly feeding it too much food and putting carbs on the table, and carbs or energy can come in whatever form you've brought it in as shopping, right? Your body doesn't really care what the energy is as long as it's getting given energy. Carbs are more easily accessible, but again, intermittent fasting is not a tool for weight loss. The reason people get weight loss out of intermittent fasting is because they removed a meal from their day. Like, they were eating 400 calories a meal, and then they took one of them away, and now, as opposed to eating 1,200 calories a day, they were eating 800. And so it's just like the same reason why any diet works. If you give someone a rule, it restricts how much food they can eat. If you tell them to eat keto, suddenly they can't eat carbs. Suddenly it's more difficult to eat lots of food and eat particularly lots of junk food. And the same thing with intermittent fasting is that it just prevents you from being able to eat a certain meal or makes that window smaller. It is completely possible that if you intermittent fast, and studies have shown this, right? If intermittent fasting people eat the exact same number of calories as people that aren't intermittent fasting, you will almost never see a change in weight because that calorie balance hasn't changed.
So there's a much bigger picture to the weight loss factor than well, it is the picture actually. Sorry, just to not eat
the picture's tiny. It's calories. Yeah, the picture's really quite small, and it's calories up to a certain point, and health can restrict someone from burning fat because of various reasons, like, you know, adipose tissue holding toxicity and your body not wanting to get rid of it if it views it as the route to you actually dying. So there are elements that do affect the like real fine tuning of weight loss, but in reality it's calories fat loss. In reality it's calories. And intermittent fasting is just a really handy tool, especially as a coach, because the key to coaching, as we talked about earlier, it's adherence. If my client is a nightmare in the mornings because I know they have a donut when they're walking into the office because there's a Starbucks trolley at the entrance of their office block, if I know that their office brings around roti canai for everyone at 10 o'clock every morning and they can never seem to say no to it, if there are all these things, then I just go, bam, okay, fine, you can't eat in the mornings, and suddenly they're gonna burn more fat because they're not eating as many calories. You're welcome. Glad that helped.
Yeah, I think Josephine and the rest of us, in fact, we're grateful for that because and you touched upon it there, and I wish this was something we had a bit more time to go into as far as myths are concerned, because it seems like quite an interesting one we've just touched on. People, I mean, like the keto diet for a while was, I mean, it still is very, very popular, but maybe perhaps for all the wrong reasons. There's a comment here. Unfortunately, I can't see their name. They haven't given StreamYard platform access.
You just need to make sure that you're not, for example, eating 1,200 and in spite of fasting only 800. Oh yeah, it's just maintaining the balance, really. I by the way, I don't want anyone to take any numbers here. 800, 1,200, whatever. Like you need to either work with a coach or do a fair bit of research yourself, use a couple of online calculators, use a few so you get like a good spectrum, because they're all just made by random people on the internet at the end of the day. And do a lot of testing yourself. You know, take a weekly average of what your scales are saying and see whether they're going up or down, because over a week's average, you'll remove fluctuations from, you know, water retention, and you're able to kind of get an idea as to what your maintenance calories are there. It requires a lot of tracking. I mean, the main reason a lot of people have coaches for weight loss as well is no one wants to sit there and go through all the calories that they ate this week and check how much protein they ate and whether they met the minimum requirements, and calculate the number of reps they did and whether that total volume is equal to more than they did the week before, and average their body weight over the course of the week. And you know, all this kind of stuff is just, it's almost like, it's just like outsourcing a lot of the time, really. You're giving it to someone who, one, can be bothered, and two, has the knowledge and expertise to help troubleshoot when stuff doesn't make sense. But yeah, it's about making sure that regardless of what you're doing with your diet, that your numbers match up. You're still getting the right number of calories. Stuff like MyFitnessPal is going to be pretty good at telling you whether you're getting the right number of nutrients, whether you're hitting your kind of minimum protein goals, all that kind of jazz.
Interesting. Well, there you have it, guys. I think that goes to show exactly how knowledgeable and well informed not just Benny, but his merry band of personal trainers are as well. So if you're looking for somebody who is really well prepared and well equipped to coach you through that every step of the way and take all of the, you know, it sounds like a lot of complicated numbers work, which I don't like doing, and I'm sure plenty of people out there don't like doing either. So give it to them. Like, let Benny and his guys do it and crunch the numbers for you. Honestly, it makes things so much easier. So I can thoroughly vouch for them in that respect. We have about 5 minutes left, by the way, Benny. So if anybody has any last-minute questions in, please fire them in below, because I know Benny loves to. I know Benny would love to take them. But the one thing I want to touch on briefly, because it's a nice little segue in from the fasting topic, and that is, of course, the fact that Ramadan is now upon us. And I know that you and your colleague have put in a lot of work to put together like a comprehensive training guide to the fasting month. So to read it in full, check out the website down below, joompa.com/blogs. But Benny, while we have a few minutes left, why don't you give us a quick overview, as much as you can, a quick synopsis or summary as to what your training guide during Ramadan is all about?
I mean, again, with, we did a few, something called, so on that blog, we've got a few articles called Lessons on Lockdown. That's where I teach people how to create their own home training workout that we talked about earlier and how to structure that. We also run into nutrition there as well. So how people can manage their nutrition, and actually they've ended up just being like quite good guides for doing both of those in general. But lockdown is just a pretty good opportunity for people to pay attention to it. And the goal was to show people that you're on lockdown doesn't mean you have to make any sacrifices in terms of your training and nutrition. Now, when it comes to Ramadan as well, we've on our books, we've got quite a few clients who fast, and as a result, there are questions like, am I going to be able to keep making progress? Am I going to be able to keep training? What's going to happen to my training during Ramadan? Actually, the bizarre thing is that being on lockdown during Ramadan is actually better, because the time constraints that you have during Ramadan and fasting and prayer times and all the stuff that comes together, and particularly if you're in a family and you've got a lot to manage, going out and going to the gym was really tricky. It's very tricky to find that time, and particularly to find that time when you feel like doing it. No one's going, oh, perfect. Well, it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I haven't had anything to drink or eat since 6 a.m. Now is when I feel like getting a training session in. Whereas if you don't have to get to a gym and it doesn't have to be open or anything like that, it's quite easy to get up and do half an hour's training at, I don't know, 4:30 if you're what we've called Muslim Mark Wahlberg, or if like maybe 5 o'clock. So we've created like a load of different profiles for when it might fit in someone's day. Like, it's impossible unless I've actually done consults like we've been doing online. Particularly our nutrition specialists have been working on this stuff. It's a lot of what we do is basically life counseling, right? As a coach, is helping people get all the little bits together, make their puzzle work. And without sitting here and going, okay, so what time do you guys usually do this in your household? When are your spare time? Okay, what can we do? What hours are you actually praying at? Because everyone has just different schedules at the moment. So without doing that, what we've done is we've just gone, I think we've got maybe 4 or 5 different options. And depending on what your current routine looks like, you should be able to find something in there that not just provides you with an idea of when to train, but also how to eat around that, to make sure that you're not trying to jam calories down your throat at the same time that your body is stressed and your histamine levels are high and your digestion is not going to be optimal. And also not trying to like pump water and food into your guts at the same time, because that's just not ideal for assimilation of nutrients.
No, I mean, I don't fast myself. I can only imagine the temptation to shovel as much food down your throat as humanely possible after a day's fasting. But it's incredibly important that we abstain from that temptation, because that will not only undo any progress you've made through the day if you have happened to be training, but it will do a lot more damage than that in the longer term as well. So
it just depends what you can afford, man. It just depends what you can afford in terms of calories, and it depends on the quality of the nutrients that you're putting in your body.
Yeah, understood. Okay, cool. Well, guys, I've been lucky enough to get a sneak preview of a couple of Benny's pieces before they've gone live. The last one I read was the lockdown training guide, and let me tell you, it is thorough and it is very well researched and prepared. And I promise you, follow it to the letter, and you will see a difference being made. And I'm sure the one for Ramadan is an excellent resource as well. So, but I think actually, the last question we'll have, Josephine again is curious about something, and seeing as it's dinner time, maybe she's wondering what you're about to have. Her question is, being a vegan/vegetarian in your case, what is a good dinner for you? What do you enjoy putting on your plate most? Now, I know that you frequent a lot of excellent, healthy veggie eateries in KL. And so you're always out there testing out new spots, and I know you've got a lot to share and to say about them. So what is it for you? What's like a perfect meal or an ideal dinner for you?
I'm gonna dodge this one because it kind of caters to sorry Josephine, but this caters to a massive gripe of mine. In that what I eat, I don't like telling people what I eat. I quite often post photos when I've gone to like good like vegan or vegetarian restaurants, because again I'm just trying to show people that there's good stuff out there. But what I eat, what I do in my training, any of that it's personal to me, and I don't like it shouldn't make any difference to what anyone else is eating. And I mean, it comes back to a big plague on social media at the moment, in that, you know, everyone's posting their workouts. Influencers are posting what they're doing for training today and asking people to copy them. And it's like, well, your joints or what you're capable of should have no effect on what I do in my training. It's an individual thing. It's a personal thing. There's certainly no blanket right. There's definitely no blanket right. There's no blanket range of mobility or motion that you have that I should have. There's no number of reps I should be able to do, number of minutes I should be able to do something for. At the same time, there's no number of potatoes that I should eat that anyone else should be eating. It's an individual, personalized thing. I really don't kind of like showing that. I like showing people that a good dinner for me is a colorful one, plain and simple. One that's got lots of color on it is my priority, because that's usually indicative of food having a wide spectrum of micronutrients and vitamins in it. That's the only thing for me. At the same time, a good training program for me is one with not a lot of color in it, because too much color, too many exercises, and it just means too many people doing too many things badly. So, you know, I think that's probably the key, a pretty strong myth to finish with. Is that everyone thinks that exercise should be varied and nutrition should be boring. And that's the key. They think that more exercises is better and just chicken breasts and broccoli is better. But that's, they're looking at competitive professional bodybuilders, right? Who they've spent decades mastering movements. So they're very good at whatever movements they do. And they need that insane level of stimulus in order to generate muscle growth. And they need very, very, very strict food and diet in order to maintain weight to muscle, like fat to muscle ratios, right? They're competitors. They're not necessarily that healthy. They care about how they look. But at the other end of the spectrum, being very good at a few exercises that are going to elicit the hardest muscle contractions and create the most force requirement through your muscle with regards to what your joints are capable of. And at the same time, having the broader spectrum that your gut is capable of handling. Don't just eat everything, including stuff that you know makes you feel ill, but a spectrum of colors is usually going to indicate that you're getting a good nutritious basis out there, and potatoes, chicken, and rice is probably not the key.
Sounds like, I mean, potatoes, chicken, and rice is actually a pretty bland plate. I think a colorful plate is a good rule to follow, unless, of course, you've gone and got yourself all 31 flavors of Baskin Robbins.
Yes.
Sounds great, to be fair, but maybe not the most nutritious profile available out there. Naturally colorful. That's the caveat. That's the disclaimer. Josephine, for the record, Josephine totally agrees. Colors are a big turn on for her too. So there you go.
Well, I didn't put it that way, but yes, that's the kind of dinner that gets me going.
We can safely say we pleased Josephine. Thank you, Josephine, as always, for your comments. And I think that is probably a good time to end it there, Benny. I know there is a lot more myths out there to bust, and a lot more misunderstandings to clear up, I'm sure, about the industry. And maybe we'll get the chance to do that if this lockdown does indeed get extended. It'd be good to welcome you back and have a little session on that. But for now, I think you've packed this hour with a lot of good knowledge for a lot of us to digest and to take on board. So thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. I'm going to plug again. Where is it? I'm going to plug again your Instagram and Jumpers. So give Benny a follow down below, and Jumpers there, and the website too, jumper.com.my, full of excellent resources. So Benny, with that, we'll say thank you and goodbye. Stay safe. I hope you don't get rained out there in Cali, and we'll see you back on the mainland soon, I hope.
Good chatting to you, buddy. Thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure is ours. Thank you, sir. Good evening.
There you have it, Mr. Benny Price, CEO of Joompa, and as I explained at the beginning of the call, a very knowledgeable man indeed. And he has lots of excellent resources available, both on his Instagram page and on Joompa's website in the blog section. Check it out for the latest guides training on Ramadan, and we're sure you will not be left unsatisfied, much like Josephine there, in fact. So that is all for that session. We will be back at 9 p.m. for a chat with Natalia Ung and KTN Rigby, who are going to be giving us a very open, very honest, very raw insight into life behind the scenes in the entertainment industry, and preserving and protecting one's mental health in an entertainment as fast-paced and filtered as the lifestyle marketing one can be. So join us again at 9 p.m. We'll be welcoming Natalia and Katian. Until then, enjoy your dinner. Make sure it's colorful. Make sure it's naturally colorful. And we'll see you soon. Good night.